Assassin's Creed Black Flag has stood the test of time and is still to this day basically unanimously agreed on to be one of the best in the franchise. Released in October 2013 by Ubisoft Montreal, Black Flag has remained as one of the more beloved AC games that we have and a personal favorite of mine. Not only did it manage to deliver one of the best assassin experiences that we had in the franchise up until that point, but it also managed to be, to be honest, above anything else, just a kick-ass pirate adventure game. Allowing players to sail the seas, get up to no good during the golden age of piracy, featuring notable figures from the time from Charles Vane to Blackbeard himself. You could engage in naval warfare, find treasure, live the pirate life through the gameplay of an assassin. It was a recipe for success, and it translated in a big way. The game was so good and still so beloved that in 2025, there are heavy rumors floating around that a remake will be coming out as soon as this year, which kind of ended up being the driving motivation for me to revisit Black Flag once again in 2025, to revisit one of the staple video games from my childhood. Was it as good as I remembered? How has it aged? Is it even worthy of its prestigious mantle, or has nostalgia carried this game for years? Well, you guys know what we do on this channel. We're going to take a deep dive retrospective look into Assassin's Creed Black Flag to answer those questions. We'll take a deep look at the open world, the gameplay, as well as the story and characters of what is, without a doubt, the best pirate video game ever made. Now, Black Flag isn't the only game that I'm going to be touching on in this video, because there is another so epic, so legendary, that it will shake the very fabric of your being, and I'm of course talking about Raid Shadow Legends. Now, they've been cranking out content like there is no tomorrow, and not only does the game have AAA graphics, which definitely are better than Black Flag's, but you know that Raid has a bunch of incredible legends to use and progress the game with. Well, Raid is actually giving away some epic and legendary champions just for you guys. And before we go any further though, let me tell you guys about the Sylvan Watchers faction. The Sylvan Watchers made their home in the Mistwood, a huge jungle in the east of Teleria. And if the beasts in the jungle don't kill you, the Sylvan probably will for trespassing on their land. They have a city open to outsiders called Nyresa, and they've made friends with the neighboring Shadow Kin and Dwarf factions. In-game, these three factions are in the Nyresan Union with a bond forged in Nyresa. There is a ton of character variety here. Elva, Autumnborn, and Cormac the High Peak are some of my personal favorites. But here's the exciting part. If you use my link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen, you can get a bunch of goodies. You will immediately get huge starter packs with an epic champion, Kellan the Shrike from the Sylvan Watchers faction, and some other useful tidbits. You'll also get another starter pack after reaching level 15, an epic champion, Uugo, who is one of the most valuable champions in game. If you use promo code TREEHUGGER, you'll get legendary champion Green Warden Ruark from the Sylvan Watchers faction. Now, this is only for new players within 72 hours of clicking the link and downloading below or scanning the QR code. And in addition to all of that, both new and existing players can redeem 2 more promo codes with useful resources. Check other promo codes for all users in the description down below, and come and find me in-game under the name Game Overload, and you can also join my clan, and I'll see you guys in-game. So the star of Black Flag is obviously its concept, and a large part of that concept is its open world set in the golden age of piracy. One of the reasons I think this open world works so well, and I chalk this down to pretty much just one word, and that word is freedom. By its nature alone, this ends up being one of the more unique open worlds out there. For some reason, the games industry hasn't realized just how cool of an idea an open world pirate game is. And the fact we need to go back to a game that came out in 2013 to get that fix is kind of sad. Yes, Sea of Thieves exists, but that's a multiplayer open world with an art style that doesn't really resemble the golden age of piracy at all. There's also Skull and Bones, which, yeah, the less said about that one, the better. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is the only game to realistically give us a full AAA open world experience set in the golden age of piracy, and it actually be good. A game where we can go from island to island, engage in naval combat, go on treasure hunts, drink rum at taverns, and just get our pirate on. The fact it is still the go-to pirate game after over a decade is really saying something, and I think the open world Ubisoft built with this game deserves a lot of the credit. Now, does the open world of Black Flag have the collectathon activities you come to expect in modern Ubisoft games? Yes. But this game was doing that before it became a tired trope of their game design. So it's kind of hard to look back on this open world negatively for all its world activities when, realistically, this game did it before it became tired and annoying. One thing that really surprised me on revisiting Black Flag was just how small this open world actually is. It's by no means tiny or anything, but especially compared to the games that have come out since in this franchise, it's really not that big. And to be honest, I found all of this to be quite refreshing. There's also no bloat on the islands, and many of them remain fairly linear. Yes, there are some bigger islands like Kingston or Nassau that give you more to do with more to find, but despite how much this open world offers the player, I was surprised jumping back into it to see that it's not as much of a collectathon as I'd gotten used to with Assassin's Creed games that came after. And I'm not talking about the RPG style AC games exclusively. I mean, even the likes of Syndicate, which came out before the RPG era. Now, with all that in mind, there are still those meaningless collectibles in Black Flag's open world, but in comparison to where the franchise went with later installments, it's nothing in comparison. And there's a lot of good stuff here, with unique ideas that take advantage of the game's amazing concept. The diving bells allow for some really cool exploration of the world. The harpooning, again, takes advantage of the game's concept. You can of course hunt on the islands, which to be fair, isn't overly in-depth. It's kind of just shoot anything you see and then use the skins to craft, but it still gets the job done. And there are obviously of course the iconic sync points spread across the open world. There are camps to take out, warehouses to loot, and sea forts to take down, which you could argue are just sea versions of basic forts you'd find in any Ubisoft game. And you'd be right, but that doesn't mean they aren't fun as hell to do because of the game's theme. Taking down sea forts with your ship, jumping off to take out enemy captains, and then breaking a door down to kill the big Donnie makes you feel like a pirate badass. And even though you could chalk these forts up to Ubisoft box ticking, they are fun as hell and make you feel like a badass pirate that everyone fears. So I have no problems with the Ubisoftification of some of the elements in this open world. Now, I know that we've gotten to the point where if we see any Ubisoft open world formula elements in any game, we look down on it immediately, and I myself am guilty of doing that. But there was a time where this idea was cool, where it was fun to liberate the map piece by piece, and I think Black Flag stands to this day as one of the best examples of that. Now, one of the major factors that led to Black Flag's success, and this may very well be the biggest, and that is, the pirate fantasy was sold to players so well in this game. The open world Ubisoft Montreal created here played the biggest role in probably selling that fantasy. You get to live the pirate fantasy through this world. You sail your own ship, you engage in naval warfare, you drink rum, you sing sea shanties on the seas, you find treasure, and the open world they put together helped to serve that pirate fantasy rather than, get in its way. Like, I even spent an hour playing checkers after sinking rum at a tavern. Like, this shit is just great. The way that you could explore the Caribbean as you pleased was just so good. And sure, there were some loading screens where you went to certain islands that could halt the seamless exploration, but again, we're dealing with a game that came out in 2013 here, so, expectations need to be in check when you're revisiting games over a decade old. But the fact that this open world was so dynamic really helped keep things from feeling stale. Small isolated islands, large towns, jungles, mysterious caves, shipwrecks, there's a lot of variety in this world that I think a lot of people forget was there. And because the naval combat in this game was so addictive, it made hitting the high seas fun every single time you played, every single time you booted up the game, to the point where you'd rarely want to fast travel, which, I mean, for me, Assassin's Creed games, they tend to be a bit of a fast travel simulator after about 10 hours. But Black Flag was always different, and it still is. Setting sail and not knowing what awaits you on your journey as you travel through the map is part of the fun. Will you come across sea life to hunt? Ships to take down? Will ships be hunting you? Will you sail through the eye of a storm and have to navigate your way through the chaos? It's all part of the fun. Quite often you'll engage in some naval combat with some other ships, and then a massive storm will roll through because of the dynamic weather, which adds all new elements to the gameplay. And due to the Jackdaw feeling like a bit of a character in of itself, you want to upgrade it. You don't want to egregiously grind your way through upgrading it in order to progress the story. Now, you will have to do that if you really do slack off, but the want to upgrade the Jackdaw and explore the waters of the Caribbean to gather enough resources to make those upgrades comes naturally. It doesn't feel like a chore, it feels like a grind, but the good kind. The kind that this franchise hasn't had in a long time. The game will tease you with the power fantasy of having a powerful ship by letting you use man of wars in certain missions, which makes you want to go and upgrade the hell out of the Jackdaw. But if you ignore those upgrades, you're still gonna have a great time, but it could be better. So you naturally want to take to the seas and do what you need to do in order to make those upgrades. So the game masterfully steers you into exploring the open world really well without doing what the RPG AC games do and tell you that you're a little bitch and will get one-tapped by an enemy because you didn't spend 25 hours grinding the side content. Black Flag just had that mix for encouraging players to grind for upgrades, but never forced them to spend ridiculous amounts of time doing it, and I have a lot of respect for that. Now, despite my continuous praise for this open world, there are a couple issues that I do have with it. I think some of the activities in the world can be a bit of a snooze fest. Like the Mayan stones, sure the reward is cool when you complete them all, but these are way too easy and are a little mind-numbing to get through. As far as my issues with the open world, that's pretty much it. There's really not that much there that I don't like. I ultimately think that the open world of Black Flag was a perfect example of freedom in an open world. You didn't need to progress the story to feel like you were getting anywhere. You could explore endlessly and put the story off to the side. You could make upgrades to Edward and the Jackdaw. You could liberate the map. You could explore the near endless amounts of side content. And it never punished you for doing that, and it never felt overly grindy. Black Flag's open world is, to be honest, one of Ubisoft's best. It's not always the most in-depth open world, but it's one that allows complete freedom in that pirate fantasy. That alone makes it unique and one of the best open worlds I've experienced still to this day. The gameplay of Black Flag was honestly the thing that I was really concerned about upon revisiting the game again. When you play these games when they first come out, they feel like the pinnacle of gaming. But when you revisit and deal with a game that's been out for over a decade, you can often get hit pretty hard with reality of what the gameplay was actually like. And Black Flag surprised me in some areas upon revisiting it in a good way, but in some areas, my fears were definitely confirmed. The general gameplay of Black Flag, I think, holds up reasonably well for a 12-year-old game. It of course has a lot of that jank that you would expect in a game that came out in 2013, but it's not enough to ruin the overall gameplay or make the game feel like it's too dated to enjoy, which is something that I often find with a lot of older Assassin's Creed games. But let's talk about the naval. The naval gameplay of Black Flag is still to this day incredibly strong. I was very surprised going back into this game after all these years with just how good the naval combat holds up. There are moments where you're stuck in massive naval battles with half a dozen ships all spraying cannon fire all over the place. The smoke from the cannons fills the screen, you hear the cannons firing. Like, this is just where the magic of Black Flag is. I had several moments during my replay of the game where I had that dumbest little cheesy grin on my face. Like, you feel like you're in the middle of a massive ship battle in Pirates of the Caribbean or something. Take the assassin side of the game out of the equation and Black Flag would still work in a gameplay sense from just its naval combat alone. I mean, you can upgrade your ship from the captain's quarters. All of your resources you can essentially get through naval combat. You incapacitate ships, you climb on board, you kill the captain, you take down the flag, whatever it might be. Black Flag, even if it was entirely reliant on just its naval, would be a damn near 10 out of 10 by itself. The naval combat and the way the game was designed around it, I still think is nearly flawless. And the reason I say nearly is because, sure, you can cheese the more difficult ships like the Man of Wars by incapacitating smaller ships around it and then tactically boarding them to repair mid-battle, which realistically wouldn't be possible in any way as you just continue to get smashed with cannon fire, but it does give some use to ships you've already taken out during the battle, and adds an element of strategy to the naval combat, so give and take. There's also various ways that you can fire on enemy ships. There's different cannonball types, there's chain shots which slows ships down, there's fire barrels at the back of the ship, mortars that are crazy overpowered, and even though you don't get to use a man of war apart from in select missions because you are tied directly to the jackdaw, you can still build your ship up to where it's an absolute monster of the seas and you can feel like a completely dominant force. Now, after engaging in battles on the seas, you do have 3 options with each ship that you take. You can use it to repair the damage sustained in the battle, lower your wanted level, or send the ship to Kenway's fleet. Now, this is one of my biggest problems with this game at the moment. Sending ships to Kenway's fleet sounds good as an idea as it can create passive income for your playthrough, but here's the problem. More often than not, especially on PC, you can't actually use this feature. You have to go out of your way to mod the game to be able to actually use it, otherwise it's just an endless loading screen. You can't use it. Now, if you do go to the trouble to mod the game so you can use it, is it really worth it? I mean, if you don't have a wanted level to lower or you don't need to repair your ship, then I guess so. But it never really felt like an overwhelming must-do because by the time you're leveled up enough to take down ships like man of wars to send them to your fleet, you're probably cashed up already. So the passive income you make from your fleet feels barely worth your time in the menus. I like the idea here, but I think the execution is just way off. This feature was always one that sounded better in idea than execution, and it's probably not worth jumping through the hurdles to get it to work. Now, I will say, when it comes to boarding ships, which is a really big part of this game, it's one of those things where the idea is absolutely perfect, but after doing it 50,000 times, you can start to get a little frustrated by the process. Now, what do I mean by this specifically? Well, let me explain. When you incapacitate a ship and you begin the boarding process, you'll often hope that you can take out all of the required enemies with the smaller swivel cannons so you don't actually have to board the ship to take one person out to activate the cutscene. Now, this only really becomes an issue with the smaller ships as you progress further into the game, as you can feel like the resources you get out of it just aren't worth it, so you just end up accepting half the resources by not boarding and sending enemy ships to the depths. But sometimes you need to lower your wanted level or repair your ship, so you've just got to do this. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering, well, what's the issue? The problem is, when you board enemy ships in this game, quite often you can get stuck on certain areas specifically within the sails of the ship and then unceremoniously fall to your death and basically just waste your time. When you board the larger ships later in the game, you'll often have to take out 10 to 20 enemies. You will also have to take out enemies on higher vantage points on the ship or even take down the flag. So you're often forced to climb up the enemy ship where these problems can occur. And it's one thing I will say does get on my nerves with Black Flag, and it's one of those areas where the game does feel a little bit dated. The parkour in these more complex areas can be a little frustrating, and you never really fully know what Edward is going to do because it's more animation based as opposed to input based. So even though boarding enemy ships is one of the coolest ideas of the game, after putting a lot of hours in, it can actually become a bit of a problem. Now, is all of this a little bit of a nitpick for me? Maybe, but this is where I think the potential remake is going to have value if it actually does happen. Refining the free running and parkour mechanics whilst boarding enemy ships could make things even better because, again, the idea of it is so good. But those little janks in the parkour on the ship specifically really can be a bit of a buzzkill. Now, to piggyback off that point, let's talk about the free running and parkour in Black Flag, because it's a bit of a mixed bag to revisit after all these years. There are moments where it absolutely works, like when you're running through jungle canopies, but maybe it's because I was fresh off playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, which for all its faults, has some of the smoothest free running and animations in any Assassin's Creed game. I'd actually argue maybe the best. Which, to be fair, it probably should. It's the most recent game and they spent a lot of time and money working on it. So going from that to this was definitely an eye-opener and probably makes me a little harsher on it than I should be. But I mean, realistically, playing a game that came out in 2025 and then going back to a game from 2013, which features the same core mechanics, is kind of a recipe for disaster. And at times, it definitely did feel that way for me. There are a lot of times where Edward will simply do everything but what you want him to do, which is obviously frustrating as it can cost you during missions and world events. Especially with a game that features so many freaking tail missions. Having unreliable movement definitely does make for a frustrating experience at times. I know it's kind of a meme to clown on tailing missions with this game, as Black Flag has a lot of them. Like, you even have tailing missions when you're using your ship, for God's sake. Now, to be fair, I don't mind tailing missions initially, but the amount of them in this game is egregious, and after you put about 10 hours into it, it starts to wear pretty thin. But here's the problem. Because you get frustrated with these tailing missions, you inevitably try and make things progress faster, which leads you to getting caught and failing the mission more often, which just means you have to do it all over again, adding to the frustration. It's this vicious tailing mission cycle. It's awful. But again, the tailing missions in the ships, I don't mind, as it's something unique. I know a lot of people don't mind them. I actually think they're okay, so I can at least appreciate that. But now, let's talk about stealth, because stealth is obviously a staple of any Assassin's Creed game, and it's decent here. Again, this is a pirate game first and foremost, regardless of what the title of the game says. So to be honest, if I could avoid stealth, I absolutely would. Not because it's bad, but because it doesn't fit with the rest of the game. You play as the hot-headed, greedy pirate, but are supposed to believe that Edward can just stealth his way through forts and camps, leaping from rooftops and hiding in the environment like a hardcore assassin when you're not playing as an assassin. But ludo-narrative dissonance aside, the stealth here is fine, and when the game's 2013 Jake doesn't interfere, it gets the job done, but is by no means a standout pillar of the game like other games in the franchise. Which, to be honest, could seem like a bit of a death sentence for an Assassin's Creed game, but again, this game is more about that pirate fantasy than anything. I don't know who Ubisoft are trying to fool. I think we can all see it. So if there was one game where stealth doesn't matter, it's probably Black Flag. Having said that, it doesn't mean I get to dismiss it in a retrospective style video like this. So I still have to talk about it. My number one problem with the stealth in this game is the fact that you cannot crouch. Often you'll have enemies all around you and you're crouched when in a bush, but if you need to move to another bush, which you will need to do a lot, you have to stand up until you can go back down again. Now again, I'm coming off playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, which again, for all its faults, does stealth very well. So going back to Black Flag, where you can't even do something as simple as crouch unless you're interacting with the environment stealth features, is extremely frustrating. Now, despite that, there are still some fun stealth features as you'd expect in most Assassin's Creed games. You've got creative assassinations, berserk darts, sleeping darts, environmental interactions, and of course, the rope dart, which will never not be fun to use. Unfortunately, the enemy AI in Black Flag does show its age. Now, I'm not saying enemy AI has ever really been the gold standard in the Assassin's Creed franchise. I still think The Last of Us Part 2 has the best enemy AI I've ever seen, regardless of what you think about the game. But here in Black Flag, it's definitely not always working as intended. This is one of those areas that I hope they really touch up in a remake, because the AI in Black Flag for me was really frustrating. Overall though, I think the gameplay of Black Flag, it's a mixed bag. It definitely shows its age in some areas, but in some areas, it's like a day hasn't even passed. It's quite weird. And it still plays better than some modern Assassin's Creed games, specifically when it comes to the naval. The pirate fantasy really is sold with the gameplay here, but I think the remake definitely has a lot of areas that it can touch up to make the perfect pirate experience for players accustomed to today's gameplay standards. Now, obviously, we can't talk about Black Flag without talking about the story and the characters. Black Flag follows the journey of Edward Kenway, a reckless pirate. The game is set in the Caribbean during the Golden Age of piracy, with Edward caught between the conflict of the Assassins and the Templars. Edward starts out as a bit of a selfish privateer, seeking fortune and glory from his time at sea, which you'd come to expect from a character in this setting. However, after an encounter with an assassin, he becomes entangled in a war between the Assassins and the Templars. Edward, across the story, eventually adopts the Assassin's cause, but his journey is as much about self-discovery as it is about the larger ideological battle. Throughout the story, Edward uncovers the ancient secrets of the first civilization, as well as the true motives of the Templars and Assassins, all whilst confronting his own battles within the pirate world, as well as his own personal demons. The story explores themes of freedom, loyalty, and the consequences of your choices, which over time makes Edward a more complex character than the original stereotypical pirate he starts out as. The story intertwines with a larger overarching plot involving the Pieces of Eden and sets the stage for future Assassin's Creed games, so there's a bit in there for the hardcore Assassin's Creed fans, but also not enough to detract from the pirate fantasy that this game delivers for the more casual fans that are just looking for a fun pirate game. Now, although this story is by no means the star of the show of Black Flag and the ultimate reason as to why people love the game so much, it's still very serviceable and it does get the job done. It's not thought-provoking, life-changing art like, I don't know, a Red Dead 2 or something, but the story does enough to make you like Edward, progress the lore, and give you a sense of the world and its characters. It achieves what it needs to, without ever excelling to the point where it just becomes absolutely timeless. But Black Flag's story does excel in one area that I find to be a weakness amongst many stories in Assassin's Creed games, and that is side characters. Side characters in this story are actually interesting and likable. Whether it's Mary Reed, Charles Vane, Ben Hornigold, Adewale, this story is rich with side characters that you actually care about. Which for me personally, when I play Assassin's Creed games, I seriously find it hard to care about characters that aren't the main protagonist every single time. Black Flag definitely does not have this issue. Now, despite that, the story of Black Flag for me is absolutely hindered by one glaring issue, and that is the modern day. Quite often you'll be off on swashbuckling, bombastic, pirating adventures, and then you'll crash back down to reality and then have to walk around a modern building with an iPad for 15 minutes. I didn't care for these modern day missions back when I played this game for the first time 12 years ago, and I still don't care about it to this day. In fact, I probably care less. The general consensus amongst most fans of this game is the modern day isn't great, and it kind of wrecks the game's pacing. And I think that's a pretty fair sentiment, and it's very hard to disagree with that. Whilst yes, it keeps up with series traditions, and it acts as a way to remind us that yes, this is an Assassin's Creed game, and there's an overarching narrative in the modern day across the games, but that doesn't mean I'm not falling asleep when these segments come up. The thing is, when I play Assassin's Creed games, I'm here for the time capsule experience of being catapulted back to the past to enjoy a story set in that time. And I've always felt the modern day storylines have hindered Assassin's Creed games more than they've helped them. Now, if that puts me in some insane asylum minority, so be it. I will completely own that. It's just one man's opinion after all. Call me a dickhead in the comments if you haven't already. Anyway, Black Flag, as I've stated, is a pirate game first and foremost, but the story does enough to remind you of its assassin roots, and it always left me wondering if it would have been better if Ubisoft Montreal just said, screw it, this is a pirate game, let's not even try to pretend any different. Because playing through Black Flag's story, you kind of get the feeling that they had a cool idea with the pirate side of the game, but were held back in some areas because it's an Assassin's Creed game. So they had to inject certain elements of Assassin's Creed lore in there to keep fans satisfied. Now look, I'm not saying the assassin side of the story here is bad, because it's not. It's obviously integral to where Edward ends up as a character, and of course, how things lead on to Haytham, etc. But I'd just rather be out there taking down Spanish and English fleets with Blackbeard or Charles Vane, instead of being thrust into an assassin and Templar battle that, to be honest, Edward, the main character, and I don't really care all that much about. And the reason I say that is the rest of the game is just way more interesting. It's like with Black Flag, they had an idea that was too good for the franchise itself. Like, I want to live in that what if scenario of what if Black Flag's story completely centralized around the English encroaching on Nassau and having to have all of these famous pirate names band together to take down the threat that threatens to end their way of life. Now, we did get that in some areas, and they tried to tie it into the Assassins and the Templars, but I would have rather they just went full steam ahead into this idea and dropped the assassin side of things. Think of the Black Sails TV show, which is a great show if you haven't seen it already. If you love pirates and you love violence and grotesque shit, that is the show for you. So I'm thinking of that show in video game form. I'm struggling to kind of contextualize what I fully mean here, but it just felt like you're on cloud 9 with swashbuckling, pirate action, and world building, and then it gets ripped away from you in favor of assassin and modern day elements. And it leaves me wondering, what could have been? It's kind of funny because people have brought this idea up for years, and that's what Skull and Bones was meant to be. And I mean, look how that turned out. So it's kind of going against my what if theories here, but I'm still willing to die on the hill that Black Flag could have been even better if they just left the AC side of the story out of it and just went head on into the pirate side of the game and fully embraced it. Anyway, with that long-winded side rant out of the way, let's actually talk about this freaking story. Accepting that this story does have Assassin's Creed elements, the outsider perspective as Edward Kenway was an interesting way to give us a look into the Assassin and Templar battle. Having a protagonist that doesn't care about the fight at all and is purely self-motivated, slowly start to find himself siding with one side of the ideology is interesting. The idea of the story is the Templars want to open the observatory for power and control, but the Assassins want to keep the power out of anyone's hands. And Edward, of course, he wants it for the cash money. He's in it for the gold. So a large portion of the story spends time showing us Edward, who, whether he likes it or not, aligns more with the Templars in an ideological sense, but slowly shifts to the side of the Brotherhood when he realizes where his true values lie. Now, I do think Edward is a very strong character. I wouldn't put him above the likes of Ezio or probably even Bayek, but he's definitely a top 3 series protagonist for me. I love how the story uses the characters around him to strip the layers back of Edward's lust for wealth above anything else. We see this explored through characters like Mary Read. We start to see Edward realize what's actually important. The death of Thatch also sticks with me. The line of, "In a world without gold, we would have been heroes," basically sums Edward's journey up in a nutshell, and it tells you everything you need to know about all of these characters. It's the best line of the game by far. Each character that Edward comes into contact with throughout this story breaks down his self-interest nature into being someone who helps a greater cause instead of just himself. They don't waste a single side character in helping Edward get to that point. This is again why this game stands out to me as one of the best Assassin's Creed games in terms of its story and its characters, because it actually uses its side characters to perfection. Ultimately though, I do like the story of Black Flag despite my complaints, and I love Edward as a protagonist, and he's definitely on the podium for best Assassin's Creed protagonist for me. But revisiting the game again after all this time through a more mature lens, I could see things in the story that I never really saw as a kid. As a kid, this was just a fun as hell pirate game with an Assassin's Creed skin. And replaying it now, I can really see that there are 3 main plots in this game. You've got the modern day plot, the pirate plot, and the assassin plot, and toward the end, they start to mesh together. But because Ubisoft tries to balance all three feel like they were a little bit starved of their potential. I'd argue the modern day didn't have much potential to begin with, but you get my point. But the one that frustrates me the most is the pirate plot, because it's by far the most interesting of the 3. This is a great story with great characters, do not get me wrong, but it could have been complete perfection, and I'm constantly left thinking of the potential what-ifs of this story. So, revisiting Assassin's Creed Black Flag after all these years was definitely a fun and eye-opening experience. This was one of the staple games of my childhood, and it's been one of my favorite games of all time for years. And having not played it for such a long time, it was so much fun to revisit. I think the freedom of the open world and the lack of bloat synonymous with modern Assassin's Creed games was seriously refreshing to come back to. And I wish more Assassin's Creed games had open worlds like Black Flag's. The gameplay, whilst timeless in some areas, is definitely due for a modern update, which I'm sure the remake will deliver on. And the story, although it seems at war with itself as to whether or not it wants to be an Assassin's Creed or pirate story, I think it still ticks all of the main boxes, and Edward Kenway is an absolute baller. What can I say? Revisiting this game, it was amazing. It's one of my all-time favorites, and Black Flag will remain as one of the best of this franchise without a second thought.